Well, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Hey, this is part 4 of Joe's Pinhole cameras. Today we're going to cover these 3 cameras. These are all storage compartment cameras. So my good friend Ethan Moses came over to my house about a month ago, and we sat down and reviewed just about every one of the cameras that I've made over the years. And it was a great opportunity, and I really appreciate Ethan for doing that. So we're doing a series of videos now from that session. Storage compartment cameras. Stay tuned. Well, when I started designing cameras back in the mid-1990s, I was challenged with the idea of how to figure out how to carry multiple sheets of photo paper in a camera without resorting to the expense of sheet film holders. And also, sheet film holders are limited in how many sheets you can carry. A stack of holders about this thick, 4x5 holders, will only give you about 8 exposures. And I wanted to have more than that out in the field. So I resorted to a variety of different ideas, which I've already shown you a lot of those, like the falling plate cameras and paper roll film cameras, where you tape the paper into a strip, like a medium format camera, for instance. But later on, I started getting to the idea of a storage compartment camera. And that's what these 3 are right here. I think, let's see, this was probably the first one I built, and then I built this one, and then this is the latest one that I built. The next camera.
Ooh, this is one of my favorites.
So the evolution of the whole idea of how do you carry multiple images, multiple sheets of film out in the world, the obvious next evolution was a storage compartment in the back of the camera. This is a Pinhole camera. It's a 5x7 format. It has a plate of thick plywood on the bottom. The rest of the camera is made from foam core, gaffer's tape, and hot glue.
The Joe Van Cleve method,
yes,
which I've been super impressed with.
And if you actually look at the balance point, the center of gravity is like just behind the bottom, like vertical center of gravity, right? So that most of the weight is on the bottom. So you have a low center of gravity, the center of mass close to the tripod head, and it's nice and stable. So you have a simple flip-up shutter that is a piece of foam core with a screw. The film plane, it's a fairly wide angle, it's maybe like 3.5-inch focal length. So the film plane uses these sheet magnets that are taped in here. And so when you cut a sheet of 8x10 photo paper in half, you'll have 5x8 sheets. These are 1/2-inch wide strips, and they basically will hold the edges of the paper in place with a 1/2-inch strip of magnet that flips in, and there's a piece of steel behind there that it sticks to. Then you have a storage compartment. The storage compartment has a floating divider, and the way I do this is I put my unexposed paper in the front half close to the film plane, and then I'll pull from that. I just basically, when I put this in a changing bag between every shot, I take the lid off, I tilt it back a little bit, I take the front sheet of paper and I put it in the back, and then I take the sheet from the front compartment and put it in here and put it in there.
You see, I would do it the opposite way, so we could be nice and confused.
Exactly. It's whatever convention you decide on, right? And then you have a simple, fairly nice, tight-fitting lid. The outer surface is covered in this adhesive plastic shelf liner that looks silvery. It's just really to give it a little bit of waterproofing in case you get caught out in the rain or something, but it's gaffer taped together. I got some nice viewing triangles on the top and sides so you can view up your shot. It's an f333 Pinhole camera, nice and sharp. 5x7 is a wonderful aspect ratio, nice image size for contact printing and stuff. So, yeah, and it's lightweight, compact, makes 5x7s, and you could carry over 100 sheets of paper in that camera. If you don't mind stopping between every shot, sitting down somewhere, putting it in a changing bag.
Right. So this is actually one of my favorite of your cameras. It's one, I love that, you know, in a few hours you can construct something that totally works and is relatively durable and useful out of just tape and cardboard is a method of building that I really have a lot of respect for. But we've also been talking about this camera for months and months now.
Yeah.
So I think this is maybe the most practical and straightforward solution to
Yep.
shooting multiple sheets of paper in a
Yes.
paper camera.
Yeah.
And so you've had the idea of having like a top or a back sleeve, and
Yep.
I'm trying to convince you to use a different type of pleather or maybe some photographer's jeans to make that type of sleeve.
Yes.
And then you've also talked about maybe having a back that swings open.
Yeah.
I think this is something I really dig. I think having a lens on it would be great.
Yes.
That also adds complications.
That's something I'm working on, is a curved film plane 5x7. It uses a binocular lens, and the curve is to correct for the optics. But it would be in some kind of a thing like this with storage compartment. You would probably have the back that pivots open, and it just pivots open, and you can change out the paper and then close it up with a permanent arm sleeve that you could get to. That's in the future.
Like as a candidate for even a camera that I would use
Yeah.
reasonably regularly, I think this is a really smart idea. Just
Thanks.
a stack of, 100, 200 sheets of paper.
Well, if I had built the lid so that instead of the lid fitting over the top, if it fit into the top, into the sidewalls, you could have an arm sleeve permanently fixed to the sidewalls. You reach your hand down on the top, you pop off that lid, set it aside, and then you could literally turn this into that.
I mean, I think with some gaffer's tape you could turn this into that, but
Yeah.
also we have a laser cutter
Yes.
at QLab, so
Yes.
let's get crazy with
We're going to
this
get
one
crazy with
soon.
this. We're going to have a compartmented, right, multi-shot camera with an arm sleeve that will give you the ability to change out the paper while the camera is still on the tripod out in the field.
Yeah, I think it's really clever.
Yeah.
And like the style of camera that's in the front is almost inconsequential to me, whether
Yeah.
it's a pinhole
Or a lens. Right, exactly. Right. It's the whole way of handling the paper and changing it out.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting and clever.
This was probably, at this point in time, the pinnacle of evolution of all the cameras I built.
Which is crazy to me. So when we got here in the morning, Joe was like, let's do this in chronological order, right? And I expected him to pull out a shoebox to start with, and one of the most complicated cameras, the falling plate cameras, is where he started, and it evolved into this shoebox with a divider.
Only Joe would do that. He overcomplicates it at the start and then simplifies it, right?
I love it. I remember when I made that shutter tester video, I went through trying to explain, to non-programmers how the program worked. And I got halfway through the video and realized it was twice as many lines of code as it needed to be. And so I killed the camera, simplified it, and then presented that one.
Yep.
And I think, the simplest way to do the thing is sometimes the nicest.
Well, there's the old expression, kill your darlings. My darling was the falling plate idea, because I thought those had actually been made 100 years ago in some way, but it was the whole idea of the egotism of inventing an idea and thinking you had to go with it. Whereas something like this, the storage compartment is a great idea, which reminds me, we have a couple other storage compartment cameras we can look at.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, yes. Let's look at it.
All right.
Okay, storage compartment cameras. Well, the previous one was top loading. This is side loading. Again, it has a plywood base bolted to a foam core camera body. This one uses these push pins for viewing dots. This one is actually missing, but I have them on the sides and bottom. It makes it easy to frame up your shot. There's a couple little handles here of foam core you can use in a changing bag to get that lid off. The inner part of the camera chamber is actually a rectangular thing made of metal that I was originally built for some other use, and I just didn't use it, so I figured I'd repurpose it. Two thin slots that you have to slip the paper into, and then there is a clip, a bulldog clip that you hold it onto. This was built before that previous camera, the silver one.
Is this one 8x10?
Yeah, it is 8x10, yeah. And then there is a storage compartment, and again with a floating divider. And the whole purpose of the floating divider, you could make a fixed divider, but the nice thing about a floating divider is you fill up one side, and then
You can be half the size.
Yeah, exactly, right. So there it goes.
So this one came before the other one?
Yeah. I didn't have the magnet thing with the flip magnets, and I had to use this little rail soldered on pieces of metal, and it's always kind of hokey to load it. You have to get it underneath the rails. And then what would happen is on this side here, the paper would bow and it would eventually come undone from the rails if you don't, because I didn't want to waste too much image area. So then I had to use a clip, and the idea was the metal of the clip would fog the paper with the shininess of the metal clip. So I had to cover it with tape, and then you kind of just close it up like that. So
yeah, I think this is a really cool camera, but now that I've seen the silver version, I want that one.
Yes, and okay, the shutter is just a rotating thingy like that, and it uses some popsicle sticks or scraps of wood to limit the travel of it, and a nice little wooden knob. Really primitive, but hey, highly functional. And again, it has a nice low center of gravity, although it's a little heavier because of that metal lining of the metal box inside. But yeah, it's pretty rugged too.
How long did it take to build this, Joe?
I'd say a few days, maybe. I think the hardest part was soldering the little metal rails for the film holder. Well, this particular 8x10 camera was one of the cameras that I hauled up to the top of Delicate Arch in Arches National Park. I had the camera under one arm. I had my heavy Bogan tripod with the plate on top of it over my shoulder. I had a backpack with my changing bag, and between every shot I would have to find a place to sit down, form a lap so I could put the changing bag with the camera in it on my lap and go to the process of changing out the paper. And it involved basically flipping it up like this and lifting off the side lid so that I can switch out the paper from the storage compartment to the film plane. So going through my notebooks of paper negatives, I shot an awful lot with this camera at one time. It was originally an f258, f260 pinhole camera. You might notice this says f130. Later on, just a few years ago, I experimented with very soft pinhole images, and I ended up putting a much larger pinhole in this camera, but originally it was much sharper. So the pictures I've taken with this, various landscape areas around New Mexico and up in Arches National Park, are really a lot of fun, and it was a pretty fun camera to use. Crudely built, but very practical and rugged, and that's what I liked about it. So you go to the cigar store and you notice they have a whole stack of cigar boxes, and you think, gee, I wonder if I can make a pinhole camera out of one of those. And this is one of these boxes that has a slot in the top, and the lid kind of has a little rabbet and it slides in a slot. And it seemed like, okay, with a little bit of modification, that would be a camera. And what happens is you have to build light baffles out of gaffer's tape and black construction paper to cover the joint, and then you have this little baffle in the back of it that covers up the joint, the opening end like that. It has a pinhole, a pivoting pinhole like that, and I'm using a little screw eye as a stop that you could also wrap a rubber band around to keep it from flipping open when you're transporting it. It uses viewing dots. A couple of them came off here. Viewing dots for viewing up your image. And then it is a storage compartment camera. So again, your film plane is right here. And I'm actually using a little slot to slip the paper in, but I did also have a piece of tape in there. And then a storage compartment that simply had a metal divider that sits in there. It's just soldered galvanized steel. I was into galvanized steel a lot.
Yeah, what a fillet.
I know. Yeah, isn't that nice? And then spray painted. So you just set that in there, and then it's rattly and noisy. But anyway, you have your paper divided into exposed and unexposed. Nice, small. It's not a standard film format size. You'll find a lot of these pinhole cameras are a custom size, right? This is probably like 3 by 4.5 or something like that. And again, when you're using these kind of cameras, you got to have a dark room, a place to cut paper to custom sizes.
Did this come first or last in the series?
It was probably the middle.
Before the silver one.
Yeah, before the silver one. Yeah. So storage compartment cameras, I think that's the way to go. I think the only thing that makes them more convenient, again, is to have an integral arm sleeve and a way to do it one-handed.
Yeah.
You know.
I really like about this one that it's really sturdy. You could throw that in a backpack and not
Yep,
worry about it.
that's right. Yeah, and it closes nicely, and I'm surprised how well light tight it is from just being black paper and tape light seal. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And you know, these cigar boxes are using finger joints and tropical hardwoods, and it's amazing. You know, they sell them for $1 or so at the cigar stores, or sometimes they give them away.
You got to take up smoking cigars.
You got to take up
some more
smoking
cameras.
cigars. I don't recommend that, by the way. So, anyways, yep, there it is.
Cool.
Not all of these cameras are really intended to be professional quality build construction. And my design philosophy was always about pragmatism. If I could get something simple, easy to make, that you could get photo paper into and make images, that was the first priority in my view. So I didn't build a lot of cameras made of fine hardwoods and joinery and all that. My pragmatic approach was more like foam core and gaffer's tape to get the thing working so I could go out and make images. That was the most important thing. This was a good idea, I think. The problem with this camera, the metal interior box, was kind of an afterthought. It was a design element that was borrowed from another project I never finished. So it's a little heavy, but being heavy, it's also quite stable, has a low center of gravity. This silver camera here is probably the nicest one of all these. Nice, elegant, simple build quality, fairly compact for a 5x7 format. And really going forward, I would be using this camera design as the basis for newer designs, like taking this and putting an arm sleeve on it so you could be able to keep the camera on its tripod base and be able to reach your arm in, open it up, and flip the paper, switch the paper. That's sort of the next evolution of this. But also going to the cigar store and getting an old cigar box and modifying it into a storage compartment camera was also another way of illustrating how easy it is to convert a container that's used for some other purpose into a pinhole camera like this with just a few light baffles, etc. So again, these are easy things to build. I encourage you guys, I hope this series has encouraged you guys to go out and build your own pinhole cameras so you can take photo paper out in the field and make some cool images. And if you've done that, leave some comments down below. Maybe leave some links to some images of your camera and the images that your cameras have made. I'd love to have a dialogue with you about homemade cameras. Well, until next time, you guys stay creative, of course, and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.